My name's Larry Stafford, and you are listening to Hell or High Water, a Finisterre podcast exploring the depths of our oceans and the resilience of the human spirit. Hello and welcome back. A bit of a milestone one as we hit episode 20 of the Hell or High Water podcast, for which we are joined by none other than Bonnie Wright, actor, director, activist and now author. For anyone who isn't familiar with Bonnie, you may be more so with one of her former characters, the role of Ginny Weasley she played in the Harry Potter film series. An odd one for this show, perhaps? Well, hear me out. Since then, Bonnie has gone on to direct a number of short films under her own production company, stand up for our land and ocean as an ambassador for both the Rainforest Alliance and Greenpeace, and more recently published her first book under the title of Go Gently, Actionable Steps to Nurture Yourself and the Planet. Within its pages, the book serves as an inspiring and approachable tip-filled guide to changing your habits, living more sustainably, and taking action. With a strong connection to the ocean, having grown up between London and the south coast of England, Bonnie now lives in Southern California, where she again is able to balance her love of the sea with an urban environment where work and the film industry is. Pitched up in her garden oasis, surrounded by the homegrown fruit and veg, we've covered just about everything on her impressive resume. The power of film, documentary and storytelling, how to responsibly utilise social media and its application to the climate movement, Bonnie's personal journey into activism and her work as a Greenpeace ambassador, and the conversation of climate anxiety, a term that we're hearing a lot of right now. So let's get right to it. Episode 20 of Hell or High Water with Bonnie Wright. Go Gently. So we're in San Diego.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And you've been down here for the last...
couple of months. I mean, properly and officially. But yeah, going back and forth for a while between two cities.
Okay, between here and LA.
Between here and LA, yeah. I moved to LA like 5 years ago. I was in New York for a bit before that. But yeah, lived in LA, always by the kind of coast. So really where we are now is like a little bit more urban than really the neighborhood I was actually in before.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it still feels probably nice in here, but it's a lot busier, which is kind of nice. I've really enjoyed being somewhere I can walk to everything I need again, which reminds me a bit more of a...
And wasn't before?
Not so much. It was much more like a car or a bike ride, you know?
Yeah,
so,
okay.
yeah, here I can pick up food and coffee and all those things
Yeah.
in a walking distance.
And, I mean, obviously I wanted to dive into all things actually like kind of what you've got going on at the moment and the Go Gently narrative and I think your journey into certainly what you're doing now with, I guess that activist stance, right? Maybe an activist is, oh, actually I don't break this chair.
Sorry.
And that, I guess the current, the climate movement that we're in, that you're engaging in and have been for quite a while now and so this might meander a bit.
Yeah,
but
sounds good.
Very organic, yeah. So, I mean, other than the kind of like steady / kind of rapid decline in our planet and planetary health and ocean health and all this stuff, when did you kind of what first triggered your desire to step up to be a part of this climate conversation, the climate movement, matters of sustainability? Because I know I'm very aware lots of people are in this space. There tends to be this kind of like a standout moment or a light bulb moment where they've gone, okay, hold on, shit, I need to do something.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes you can pinpoint it, and then other times you realize it kind of started long before that pinpoint, like that kind of key moment. I think for me, I was fortunate, and I'm fortunate enough that my parents, when I was growing up, had a very they had a respect for kind of what we had and really making the most of what we had and really looking at that kind of quality over quantity kind of mindset. I think, you know, they're both makers, they're craftspeople, they're jewelry designers, and their kind of respect for like materials and like the effort that goes into being made things is really important. Yeah. And I think we've sort of lost that with how fast we consume things. It's kind of just very throwaway mentality. And I think a loss of kind of importance put into the material and effort that went into making that thing, that it isn't waste, it's actually something, you know. And I think so that just mentality, I think, of not being wasteful and respecting kind of the things I interacted with came from quite a young age. And then I think for me, I've always, my favorite place to be is by the beach and by the coast. And so I was seeing sort of firsthand in the course of my life already it being kind of more and more polluted, and sort of just being like, how is this happening? Like how can I get involved? And like, what systems aren't working that, rubbish and different things are ending up on our beaches? Like, what part do I play, and what parts are like kind of system and government issues as well, like that kind of individual collective duality of the way you approach anything. And so I began to be more and more concerned, more and more sort of curious as to like understanding everything that was happening. But I think a real like turning point moment for me that actually made me like double my kind of curiosity and like energy and like somewhat kind of frustration and anger to the situation was going on a ship with Greenpeace in 2017 or 18, I forget now. And they were just doing a tour down the Atlantic coast to coastal communities all down the coast of America, with different issues into each coastal town. So I just joined them for the kind of last section. But during that trip, we kind of trawled for microplastics, and they had been trawling for the entire like 2-month trip. And, that just meant like dropping a net down, having it kind of drag behind the boat for an hour, pulling it up, and sort of scientifically looking at what each of those things were being pulled up. And
so data collection, a lot of that, isn't
data
it?
collection. And so it was seeing that firsthand when you look at this vast, beautiful ocean that looks crystal clear and beautiful, and pulling up plastics, and them saying not one of their trawls did not pull up something. And that's just one ship, one tiny bit that their boat was dragging on for 2 months. That's just tiny scale in a very vast problem. But suddenly it made this kind of issue that sometimes is quite hard to connect to out at sea, out of the ocean, kind of really like happen in front of my eyes. So it was that moment, and also just being on the ship with all the sort of ocean campaigners and campaigners within Greenpeace, and just they're just so passionate about it, and so kind of, that like beautiful mix of like anger, but also like compassion and hope. This kind of like fire that you have in you, but also this softness I think you need to have if you're going to commit to that kind of campaigning at the long term. You can't be someone who, loses hope. So just those people and that trawling just kind of triggered me upon going home. I need to like make this part of my daily life, like making changes on an individual and collective level, whether that was kind of becoming an advocate for this issue of ocean health with Greenpeace, which I then became an ambassador for them, whether that also meant like individual things that I was doing in my day-to-day life to be a bit more part of the change I wanted to see and not just wait for it to happen. So I guess that was like the proactive shift in me, that trip.
Okay. I spoke a bit about this week, and like being reactive and then being proactive. And there's a huge difference. In fact, particularly when it comes to cleanup practice and the way in which organisations and foundations mobilise their staff and what they're dealing with year on year, and campaign on campaign, and it's a fine balance, I think, between being reactive all the time and then being proactive in their approach to, continuously conserve an environment, an ocean environment. Okay, well, that's quite and the you mentioned there Greenpeace, obviously recognised for, how long has Greenpeace been going for now?
I feel like since the 70s.
And it feels like they've got so much momentum and expertise, and it's the scientists they employ, it's the volunteers on the programs, it's that passion is pretty strong throughout. And but you mentioned there about hope as well. That hope's a massive part about it, particularly in speaking of like climate anxiety, and where everyone can get, burnout, I think, has become a big thing amongst people who've worked in this field for a number of years, the constant challenges and hurdles, and so to remain hopeful and to feed off one another's kind of thing, and that's a huge part of this.
Definitely. And I think also what challenges me sometimes when people ask that direct question of climate anxiety or climate, burnout. And I think there's two parts of it. I think there's the kind of just the anxiety we can be put under by it constantly sort of being part of the dialogue when you put yourself in these kind of spaces. Obviously, the dialogue is always about this, right? If you're really passionate, you're in a movement, that movement is like consuming.
Yes.
So it can be part of your kind of day-to-day life. But then I think what's important to kind of differentiate always between being part of a movement and being part of a community that's already directly affected by the climate crisis is so important, I think, to differentiate. Like for me, you know, I'm not yet truly directly yet like affected by it. Like I am not within a community that is in the kind of most affected areas. So I think it's always important to know that there's a massive part of privilege that connects me, that protects me from really what that must feel like, not just anxiety, but like threat of the climate.
Yeah.
And so I think it's always an interesting, when I've had conversations with people who are already directly affected, it is just always so amazing to hear their like resiliency and hope within that. And I think it helps you who are equally doing something to be part of it, but just from a different perspective and like lens. And I think that's why storytelling for me is always like the most interesting way beyond statistics and everything. While we need science and we need those statistics and data collection, I just think there's nothing more powerful than having the ability I have had through kind of the platform I've had to meet certain people that have totally changed my perspective on the situation because their unique and direct experience of the issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, and always finding hope in those moments is like, oh wow, like, you know. And so I think that when faced with my own climate anxiety or kind of burnout, you know, when I just remind myself of those people connections I've had, I like don't, that kind of drifts away. And I think that's why, you know, when you talk about like organizing and organization and being proactive, I do think that's why the best thing to overcome the being overwhelmed is by finding a community or a group or someone, so you're not just like at home alone.
Right?
Yeah. And you're like, oh yeah, everyone's feeling this, and this is like, you know, and you can like find light in it and humor in it as well, you know.
Yeah. I've seen the conversations and what you put out with your storytelling and like instant storytelling as well, like those on the front lines who are, you know, living through some of the hardest kind of moments of, you know, immediate climate change, and but then also those people who are working within their communities to counter it and to raise awareness and to and storytelling is a huge part of that. And it's I mean, I'm going to hop all over my notes here, but like the storytelling and the power of film, and I'm trying to reference a few things like we've seen recently, like Earthrise Studios, you might have seen, and brilliant series of YouTube stuff, and Seat at the Table stuff that was a big part of COP last year, with Jack Harries and Alice Eady, and then Water Bear Network, and even the success and the kind of awareness that came off the back of films like Seaspiracy. As controversial as that was, it put those issues in the public space, and it got everybody talking about it. It was in, I remember Clubhouse, the app launched around the same time. Clubhouse went bonkers about this Seaspiracy, and you had sustainable fishery folk speaking to all kinds of people, and it was, but people were talking about it.
It's great.
And that film and kind of like that moving picture it's a massive part now of the climate movement now. So I know your history with film, and you studied film, and you part of a big franchise of films, and you've directed your own stuff. So where's your head at now with film and that kind of medium for climate change story?
I think also like what, you know, Seaspiracy on a documentary level, as you say, and then obviously more recently like Don't Look Up from like a more storytelling like kind of narrative perspective. I think it's just like, again, why it's so powerful to exist within popular culture as film can, is a platform that can just completely intersect through generations, through demographics, through everything. And I think that's what's so great about film. People kind of escape to it, so they like open themselves up in the cinema experience, and they become, I think what's so fun about it, more kind of open and malleable, because you're literally suspended into this story, and you sometimes can let down these barriers or boundaries you sometimes have when consuming the news, which you're quite like, these are my values and this is what I think. Whereas I think when you watch film, you're just like emotively more open. And that's what I've enjoyed really from an acting perspective and being part of a film from that angle, and then also from a directing perspective. And so the last couple of years, it's like taking a break because I was writing my book. But 2 summers ago, I made a short film that was like the first film really that transitioned to intersect like climate crisis issues with my kind of storytelling. So it was a short film that's actually kind of a horror story, but it kind of brings in, it's called Consumed, and it's basically kind of using kind of horror and kind of this unseen monster as a kind of metaphor or personification for like our consumption and waste. And that was a film that was kind of a stepping stone to this other film that I'm now working on with 2 writers that is kind of a bit of a larger scale feature-length film that again is kind of this horror monster idea, but looking at huge issues of kind of, this is looking at like kind of the toxic kind of waste and like runoff that happens from kind of factories essentially in this kind of coastal town. So
is that clothing industry?
It's actually at the moment like it's like construction material more. I mean, it's kind of, in a way, while it will be something, it kind of, there's so many industries that create waste, whether that's through, you know, dyeing or whether that's through, you know, kind of treated waste, toxic waste, or kind of, you know, materials that's hazardous. And so what has kind of been fun for me is playing with something as melodramatic as kind of horror monsters and that kind of world can be in a very melodramatic issue like the climate crisis, but you're suddenly kind of able to just, I think the most fun for me is just how do you change someone's perspective of an issue from the beginning to an end to a film, and like how much room you have to play there. So while I've definitely been interested in documentary, I think my kind of foundation that is within like fictional storytelling always is like so still to the core of me, and I'm still really want to tell more and be involved in more kind of narrative fictional stories, I think, at this moment, than kind of the documentary realm of this storytelling, this type of storytelling.
Yeah, I guess there's multiple ways to do that then, isn't there?
Yeah.
I forgot you mentioned Don't Look Up There.
Yeah.
And it was, it speaks to it, of course, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it does it in a way that
that's kind of can
transcends
be removed.
that as well, Yeah, wow. You spoke there about waste and consumption, and I know that, you know, obviously we come from the clothing industry, and it's something that year on year we try to better our practice, and 20 years on, you know, we're still learning how to, you know, clean up our processes and the best people we can work with, and supply chain is forever you know, it's a huge issue, and I'm not very close to that side of things myself. That's why we have the experts we do and employ them to do that, and work with other experts and leading people in material science and all this. But one of the things we're definitely and I think a big part of the industry is trying to get to this model of circularity, and that integrates everything from waste and virgin material to recycled material, and that and closing that loop. Is that something I mean, how well versed are you in that kind of in the clothing industry, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think for me,
because it's something that we all partake
touch it intimately every day, our clothing.
And it's so often overlooked.
Yeah, and I think, again, going back to kind of my, like, that original early on, like, kind of care and interest in materials and quality over quantity from a childhood kind of level has always been so part of me. You know, I'd prefer to get something and I have the privilege to get something that's a bit more of an investment item, but I know that will last me, you know, a lifetime, not that kind of throwaway culture of fast fashion, and really kind of choosing more quality materials that are built to last, you know. So yeah, I mean, in my book, I talk about this massively in terms of the consumer choices we're faced when it comes to everything. And obviously a big topic is clothing within what we purchase in our lifetime. So, and I think a big thing that I always think is so important to admit for anyone is I personally don't like to use the word sustainable because I think it's been massively like misused and kind of warped and changed, and nothing, right, in the way that we consume new things is in theory meeting the definition of sustainability. No. So I think
it's been sullied.
For sure.
It's a buzzword. It's
and
very
it kind of
easy
really,
for people to kind of use it and get away with it, actually. I think it's people cracking down on it.
Oh, for sure,
but
And I think, too, it disregards people who are truly doing, like, actually sustainable work, you know, or, like, more. And I think when you look at the closed loop of a business or all their practices or the sustainable practices, like, you can't, in my opinion, kind of take on that kind of word without, like, you saying that you are applying it to every stage of the manufacturing and processing and the afterlife of things. So yeah, I mean, I always think of like the best way to describe like a closed loop is like waste equals energy, and waste is never an end thing. And actually there's energy within that, whether that is compost to grow more, you know, plants, whether that's kind of upcycling something to be something, or if a material is the true definition of recycling. Like, I think a big problem too is these kind of systems that were created somewhat corruptly, like the recycling system, you know, that was created by the plastics industry to make you believe that you could recycle your plastics at a time during the sort of 70s and 80s where plastics was beginning to be realized as actually not a good thing, but it had just had this boom of the industry. So it was like, oh, how do we solve this problem so people keep consuming plastic so that they think it can be recycled? But all plastic is mainly downcycled, not upcycled. I mean, not recycled. So yeah, I'm massively interested into the systems that exist within industries that playing with materials, whether that's, like you say, virgin material, recycled material, if it's a regenerative material, if it's a non-renewable kind of resource, and all those topics I attempt to explain in my book, but it's a vast and huge thing. And like, I'm interested in it because I'm fascinated and curious in with materials.
How have you got to, I mean, you speak so fluently, innit? How have you got to that stage? I mean, it comes with speaking with others and sharing knowledge and, you know, listening to the experts and stuff, and the science, but it's a lot to absorb, isn't it? And I guess the book is something that breaks it down and makes these things digestible and turns it into something the everyday person can use, and is my understanding of the book. But the just to get to a stage where you can translate that to somebody else, it must be been quite a process.
I think, I mean, you know, in the book, my main thing is trying to make these large, abstract to the every person in our lives more at a sort of scale that we can comprehend, that's tangible and it relates to our life, not kind of this kind of thing that can be out of sight, out of mind, and therefore we maybe don't connect into doing those things. So yeah, it's about making those things applicable. So like these things, you know, big keywords like non-renewable, regenerative, like how does that relate to the, you know, the trousers I'm wearing? Like what does that mean? Or also the livelihoods that affects that trouser being made. So I think with my book too, what was so important for me, there is no good or bad. There is no right or wrong when you're making decisions. If you are thinking of the climate and people in mind, it's not, unfortunately, as easy as that. There's so many more gray area, I think, within all these things. And that's what I guess made me be interested in it, because I was like, how can I know more so that my decisions can be more informed and intentional? And I think at first you know, back in that moment, post Greenpeace trip, like wanting to do the right thing, you kind of think, oh, I got to eradicate everything, and you know, I've only got to live this way. And then you're like, you know what, actually that's very hard to do, because there's so many systems that make it impossible to make the best perfect choice. And the book is really about the idea that there is no perfect, you know, sustainable choice with anything. It's like you just need to know a bit more so you can make a better decision. And so the book, all I'm trying to do is enable people to have more information and ideas so that they on their own can make the best decision that makes sense with their lifestyle.
And that's really key, actually. There's not a blanket way for everybody to abide by. And there's just not, you can't say things like, you know, you can't be like,
it's awful. No one can drink out of a plastic water bottle, single-use plastic water bottle. Everyone needs to end them forever, everywhere. But the reality is there's people who can't turn the tap on and drink clean water. So how does that? That's a pure example of there is no blanket way to tell someone.
Well, it's like the argument for eating fish.
Yeah.
You know, you can't, and I think that's where Seaspiracy perhaps fell short, actually. And it was... everyone stop eating fish. And the reality is that, you know, communities in island nations
exist on that, and they have for generations.
And maybe we don't go with fish route.
But again, just the idea that everyone is uniquely different, and also people, like I'm interested in materials, someone else might be like, yawn, that's boring. I'm interested in something else. So
play to your strengths and
and play to like the joys that you like to do, you know. It's almost like the New Year's resolution thing, when everyone tries to take on too much in January, and then you're like,
and then you fall short,
and then you get
feel
really
discouraged,
upset.
And so it's small and many.
Go
and
gently, as the book.
Go gently. Okay, how long did it take to come to the title?
Actually, it kind of
has it been a long-standing
sort of
mantra?
Formed. It was like a weird like accumulation, and then it like I was like, So that came quite early on, like with the pitch of the book, as I like began to pitch it to publishing, like or even at the proposal level, I kind of and each chapter in the book is go something. So like go learn is the first one. Then there's like go make, go cook, go beyond, go. There's everything is a go something.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not out yet. It's out in April.
No, very soon.
I think about probably when this goes live.
Oh,
so
cool.
That could help. That's
the 19th of April.
There you
it's
go.
Out in the UK. In New Zealand, Australia, and America, and Canada.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I imagine, again, a journey to get to that. And you must be anxious, but proud, like...
I don't even... When the actual day comes out...
Is it finished?
It's all
okay, cool.
done. Like, I get to see the first copy of it next week, physical copy.
Wow, okay. Amazing.
But yeah, it was... I finished writing it in, like, August last year, and then it's just been all the design process of, you know, all of the layout, and there's a lot of illustrations and loads of photos in it.
Yeah. Photos help.
Yeah,
like a cookbook.
definitely help.
Like, if
but it's still
no one
good, like
cooks a recipe that hasn't got
words,
a picture.
so it's still. You need some break it up with my chat. But I feel like when it actually comes out and people are reading it, it's gonna be kind of a nervous day.
In your first publication, right?
Yeah, first ever book.
Yeah,
Never thought I would ever have a book.
Was it all personal, or was it someone kind of G you on to go, hey,
it's all been personal. I mean, there's been different times over the years where people have kind of approached me with ideas to write a book, but their idea of what I should write wasn't kind of right. And then suddenly I was like, ooh, I know the angle that I want to kind of portray, which is this kind of angle of this kind of how do you sustain making change without burning out at the reality of trying to like implement that? Like, how do you make something obtainable, accessible, and sustainable in the idea of like sustain over time these actions? Not like you say, give yourself all these New Year's resolutions and then fail at them and then kind of walk away.
Yeah, and we've been doing a journey. You know, we've been on something the last kind of couple of years when it comes to activism, ocean activism, and trying to empower as many people we can to do what they can. And so we kind of look at it as there's this scale between like someone starting out and someone who lives in, you know, Bristol in the UK and just wants to do a little bit more in their coffee shop and eradicate plastic straws, right? And to a radical activist, you might be on a Greenpeace vessel, or might be on a Sea Shepherd boat, or might be, you know, doing. So there's a scale for people to I think you can work up that dial as little or as much as you want, but it's definitely something that everybody can do. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I was going to ask you where the mantra from "Go Gently" came from. That's cool. We've done that. Yeah. Actually, it's quite a nice kind of segue onto that. Is there are lots of tools now for people to use to get involved, to do things differently, and to clean up their own personal act, or to start buying better. But in the digital world, where we've got Instagrams, and I know you've got the YouTube channel, and these are great tools that sit in the public domain that people can learn and educate from. And then I'm just trying to think what other tools we have. I mean, everybody as a consumer has the kind of power of choice and spending kind of power, and how people choose to invest their money.
Yeah.
I know you've got a pretty hefty Instagram account yourself, for example. How do people start using these things themselves to make a difference, or to inform 3 or 5 other friends, or to...
Yeah, I think it's like we all have these... There are so many tools that I think sometimes can be almost distracting because there's so many.
Yeah.
And like diluted, right? I mean, like, even in my own kind of inner world, I can think like, oh, is this too much that I've kind of started the YouTube and I have the Instagram and different things? But to me, they answer parts of me that I like to use. Like the main reason I started the YouTube is because I missed making films, because I'd been writing for so long. And I was like, oh, I just want to make some things that I like, that method of storytelling. And to me, it felt like it could be a bit more longer form. It could be a bit more intimate. It could be a bit more interactive. Yeah. At a time where my relationship to Instagram felt like it was just becoming like a sort of resharing news channel, rather than like people truly dropping into concentrating and watching and listening. And I think with all of us, like, our interest in all these platforms ebbs and flows. Sometimes we love it, and sometimes we don't want anything to do with it. So I think it's individual. It's so individual. Yeah. And I think if you are trying to harness or use those platforms to share with friends, like kind of mobilize or whatever you want to do, I think you also can't allow it to be the only place you do that, because they aren't. Yeah. Sometimes, as human beings, we like to see like kind of quite direct cause and effect of our actions. Quite used to assuming that we need to see like progress or change like in front of our eyes. But those types of platforms sometimes are kind of hard to equate. Is anything I'm saying on this thing doing anything? Like, because just how it is. Whereas I think if you actually connect firsthand with people, have conversations, they tell their friend, then you all meet up and you decide to go to a rally, a beach cleanup, that you can see in front of your eyes is like, oh, like we actually all just went to that thing. Yeah. Whereas sometimes those platforms, while great, I think they have to be done in tandem with real life things, because I think sometimes you can feel like it's a kind of echo chamber or a void of things, and you can't quite get like dialogue back. But then on the flip side of that, I've met some of the most interesting people within the climate movement through Instagram. Yeah. And had amazing conversations with them through DMs or on an actual Instagram live, or there's about 14, 15 people I interview in my book, and most of those people I met through Instagram kind of conversations. So I guess
the last 2 years.
Yeah, and exactly. And for so many people, and for a lot of people still, they might not live in a major city, and that doesn't mean that they want to, but they still want to connect to people.
And the digital thing does make it far more global.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Right. I mean, the fact that we can watch stories online of someone firsthand somewhere where a flood is happening, somewhere where a fire is happening, like that type of material sharing and mobilizing is like unreal for so many people.
We've exactly that. The last 2 years have been a struggle, but in many ways it's been a lot of you're talking like online conferences, and it's put a stopper on travel for better or for worse. But the face-to-face action and the community kind of integration, and the way people get together and can really get together is important.
And sometimes those community things can be online. I mean, that could be a group of 5 people who have a Zoom every month to chat about what they want to do, and they're just like, so it's a bit more kind of like a meetup rather than just texting, as sometimes that kind of DM text post can be thrown out there, whereas an actual in real time for 20 minutes with someone on a call can sometimes like just make you feel kind of better, I think, or like seen or heard or whatever that may be.
Yes. Yeah. And back to the book, actually. So we've actually published a few things over the last couple of years, which was about the ways in which people can map their own personal kind of, journey into these things, and document and take note and almost measure their impact and stuff. So is that a part of what you've got coming out? Is it yeah, is it
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, I think we all have different like ways and brains we like to do things. Like for me, I'm someone who likes organizing things, making lists, you know, having this kind of goal, kind of not always this sort of big goal, but I'm always kind of on a kind of track. You know, some people, while my mind still flits around, I think we all have different ways that makes things more manageable or applicable, you know. So there is a chapter that is all about kind of organizing our time that gives us more freedom in the end. So, or also organizing our time, say for our week ahead, knowing that many people have so many things in their lives that can make sure that they can be implementing these changes they want to do in the week they have ahead, so that it's manageable and sustainable and attainable in that way to like sustain it over the week, so that they can keep up with it. And again, going back to this thing of like starting small with just a couple of things and trying to do those well, rather than trying to change the world in a week and discovering quite quickly that it's very impossible to do so. Yeah. So yeah, there's very much a bit about kind of organizing time and sort of celebrating those wins or like senses of achievement that you feel when you do something and you're like, that was great and I actually enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And knowing
before you move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and knowing like, oh cool, I'll just keep doing that then for a while, rather than load something on again and again. So yeah, there's a chapter kind of about organization of personal time, and how to like implement these things.
And this might be a bit on the spot, but what would be like three things or quick, easy fire, no brainer tips for people? And I guess there's stuff that is around the house. I imagine stuff is about how we might come to travel, or what would be kind of 3 top?
I think it's so hard because I think a big thing I say in the book is, you know, take an issue you care about and intersect it with an area in your home you love to be in or you find joy in. So for me, when I started, I was deeply concerned for ocean health and single-use plastics. I love to cook and being in the kitchen. So I intersected those and I started by looking at single-use plastic packaging and then packaging in general within my kitchen environment. So it was like manageable, it was easy. I loved to be in that space. It wasn't somewhere I was like, oh God, I don't like cleaning out my wardrobe, or I don't like changing my laundry or cleaning habits, but I loved the kitchen. So it was like, oh, this is really fun. Like I'm beginning to see I'm putting less in the bin and suddenly now into composting and wow, like all that food waste that's not going in the bin and now I'm like doing something with it. So I think in each space, there's like a couple of things, right? So in your kitchen, it could be, you know, food waste. It could be kind of choosing to cook things from more whole foods, like whole food ingredients, so that it isn't processed and overly packaged, and therefore immediately beginning to lower your, you know, single-use packaging consumption. Whether that's kind of looking to where the produce was grown, was that organic, was it regenerative, like those kind of things, or how far did it come to travel to get to you? They could be some topics in the kitchen. And then some people might love beauty and they start in their bathroom and they love makeup and they love, you know, those kind of products. So I think it's so hard to give like a blanket, like couple of suggestions.
No, but I get that's kind of painted a picture for me how that you say that intersection between something you love and really care for, and that, which makes applying it in practice easier, I guess. And then you mentioned there, and again another theme throughout this week has been like, if these things are fun,
then if
you can make them fun
time.
or, you know, or playful again, like far easier achieved.
And the second chapter in the book is called Go See, and it basically does this. It kind of walks through every area in your home, and it uses this kind of exercise basically of what I kind of first kind of did myself, which I just called an inventory table, where I was like, okay, I'm going to start in the kitchen and people kind of use it when they say a rubbish audit or a trash audit. You do kind of similar thing. You take out 5 pieces from your rubbish bin and you sort of identify what they are. So I kind of applied that to, you know, your bedroom. You could take out a jumper, candle by your bed, notebook and pen, pair of jeans and socks, and you just look at the environmental impact of those things, just as a kind of exercise, like, oh, whoa, I hadn't even thought, where's this cotton from? Or like, oh, this is interesting, I did buy this secondhand, that's cool. Or like, oh, I could have bought those, you know, leggings in a natural fiber, then when I wash them, I'm not going to shed microplastics. So that's kind of an exercise where it helps you to look at like what's already at play in your home and how to kind of look at the backstory behind each object rather than like the whole kitchen at once or the whole whatever at once.
Yeah. We've mentioned plastic a few times, and I know you could do a whole show on plastic pollution, and it's something that feel like you've been an incredible spokesperson for plastic pollution and the plight of our oceans when it comes to that, and I guess speaks to the Greenpeace kind of voyage. We say voyage you went on? Yeah. But I mean, where we are in the States right now as well, and you go into the supermarket, it feels like it is going to be a massive thing to eradicate. And there's still a lot of teaching and learning and kind of education around even that as a just plastic pollution and single use. I had this chat yesterday again, plastic used correctly is an amazing thing.
What it's done for many different industries. That is something definitely
it's life-saving,
high properties for sure. Exactly. I mean, but again, it's the how many uses it's the durability of that plastic, and if it's like designed to be, touched, emptied of something and instantly thrown away. You could touch a piece of plastic for less than a minute in its use and it's done, whether that's drinking a coffee, whether that's whatever that may be. But I think, it goes back to that kind of idea of like, you can't say, let's eradicate single-use plastic bottles everywhere. There's water to drink. And then you're discounting millions of people do not have access to clean water. So I think when it comes to single-use plastic packaging, in the food and beverage industry, because that's one of the biggest single-use kind of, makers of that, you just like to connect the like petrochemical industry, the fossil fuel industry with the plastic industry, and just seeing how married they are to one another is really where we need to focus the energy on. Because yes, we can each do what we can in our day-to-day life, and while that is definitely a part of the book, there are some things that you will find like you just hit a wall with because there's no other option out there for most people to shift to buying bulk things, buying something in a better material that's inherently more expensive. Like most people are up against accessibility and cost when it comes to anything. So the only way a lot of those things can change is the big corporate companies, which is so much of Greenpeace's work, the Coca-Colas, the Pepsis, the Procter & Gamble, they change because like that's where the majority of the world and population is buying their things from. So and it also needs to happen on the fringes of society, of great brands making great new things, because as those brands are able to put in these concepts for refill places, amazing plant-based materials, all these things, that will filter through, because then the Coca-Colas, the whatever, if they really want to do anything, will hire those type of people who've been doing that groundwork to come into those companies. So I think it's just like multi-pronged approach.
Because the smart people and the science and the know-how's there already.
They're there. They're 100% there. And the power and money behind those big companies is 100% there. It just comes down to the horrible reality of those companies being driven by the bottom line.
Yeah.
Virgin plastic is cheaper than recycled materials most of the time. You know what I mean?
Which is then where our kind of power as consumers
becomes completely, and it's and I think it's so important. And I took me a while to be like, that's okay. Like when you're trying to be empowered and make all these right choices, it's okay sometimes to be like, I'm actually kind of powerless with this.
Yes. Okay.
And while I can for sure advocate and do what I can, it's okay that like I've gone to the supermarket today and I'm stuck with this choice, or I'm in a rush right now and this is that's human. Otherwise this kind of like black and white is to me
you can't
like
beat
just
yourself
impossible.
up
You
in
can't,
this
otherwise
stuff,
it's like counterproductive. And like focus on something else you did that day that felt good. There's other things, you know.
Yep. So I mean, have you had any kind of really big challenges in the last few years when it comes to this? Is there stuff that I know in the fight for planetary health, is it? And the people who've been doing it for decades upon decades, you must feel sometimes you're just hitting your head against a wall, just constantly or butting heads with policymakers or these. Actually, how far down the kind of to that pointy end of things do you actually go in your work at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's I think through the course of like writing my book recently have probably like, and just like there's less like direct action that often is about like policy or challenging corporations, has been less happening in real life. I've definitely like not done as much as that, and it's been kind of nice to sort of step back. A lot of that feels quite like front facing and quite like aggressive, which it should.
Yes.
And sometimes the kind of like, you know what, actually I'm just gonna like look after the things that I care about and the people that my actions ripple out to, because each of us, as we make changes, that ripples out to and is impressionable to people around us. So I've been trying to kind of focus a bit more on that to kind of recharge, I guess, and like make sure that I don't give up and I keep going. And I think a lot of people naturally do ebb and flow between that, like going out there into the world and then needing to kind of recuperate and have a kind of winter in their own metaphorical way. So that's kind of been what I've been doing, and naturally, as we all have, we've all gone inward, we've all gone home, we've all been less kind of out there. I definitely feel like I'm like ready to kind of get back out there again, but I think also a huge massive thing that's happened in the last few years for the world is this kind of very, very needed and important shift and reawakening of like civil rights and the intersection of these climate issues and how they cannot be ignored. Like marginalized community, people of color cannot be ignored in this dialogue, when actually most true land protectors out there, you know, are people doing it because it is part of their inherent culture to take care and steward their land. So for me, that's been a massive kind of learning process and kind of challenge that I should feel as a white privileged person, to be kind of really go inward and see where I've experienced privilege when it comes to these issues, when it's even come to my accessibility to education around these issues. And
I saw the Leah Thomas
her book,
Green Girl Leah book on your table there, which of course she had an incredible amount of traction back when Black Lives Matter. Yeah,
and Intersectional Environmentalist, her sort
That's the book,
organisation and movement. And so, and the beauty again of going back to Instagram, the joy I've had of just expanding my conversations with people and expanding, you know, perspectives and identities of, you know, whether that's, I mean, there's just so, I mean, and I think that's what's so beautiful for people who want to get involved. And maybe it's very much through their identity as a queer person, as a whatever that could be. There are now just so many groups that exist online or in real life that they're not just a climate group, they're a climate and something group.
Yeah, with their own take or flavour, or do you know what I mean? It's and
interests and just being seen and heard and comfortable. Because I think a big reality is sometimes joining a group, having a conversation with someone can be intimidating when you are worried, like, am I going to say the right thing at this event or meetup? So I think the minute you can make and allow someone to be seen by someone else they see doing it, the more likely that person is like me. I can do that. And so it like enables people, I think, to have a bit more of a kind of road in. And I think that's what I've loved so much from the feedback that I've even got through using the platform of social media for these things, is the amount of times in the comments, like, you know, most obviously, a lot of people obviously follow me because of Harry Potter, so they'll watch that and be like, oh, I've been following you because of this, but now you've just introduced me to this and I like what you do, so now I'm doing that too. Like, there's just a reality that we look up to people around us, and we're more likely to be like open to trying ourselves if someone that we've given kind of love and authority to like agree with. So it's just always been so fun to have this platform that's like introduce people to something that they may have not have been in their mainstream of their feed, let's say.
Which is where, you know, social media as a tool is in, you know, we all get jaded by it, don't we? And we can put it down and go, God, I've been on that too much.
And
it's awful, you know, and it's used in the wrong way by many people, and you know, but it's also really is a source of information, and as a
connectivity, and
it's something that, like, and back to what I said earlier, like it's one of the most powerful tools we do have now, and if used correctly, it can be an amazing ally in particularly in the climate movement and that. Yeah, wow, okay. Yeah, I wanted to talk about your again your relationship with the ocean, because you mentioned when we were speaking earlier, you said that you'd grown up with access to the coast and down in the south of the UK, and where you are in relation to it here, and you surf. You have a surfing career?
Yeah, I don't have a surfing career. Just my own hobby.
Yeah.
I guess I've always, I grew up in the heart of London, right in the city in Shoreditch, but my parents, we had a house and still have a house on the south coast of England. And, we'd leave school on Friday and go to the beach pretty much, every weekend. So we had this very city urban life, and then we had this complete different life where we had this expansive beach where the tide went out really far and it's miles long, and this whole area stretched before me, and it was this playground of just like losing myself in that environment. And I think I didn't realize really how much that kind of really just kind of inspired me and made me who I was, made kind of where I find most peace and creativity is by the water. I find the minute I can see a horizon that's not broken up by buildings, I feel like instantly like better, and just feel like everything feels like expansive and possible for me when I have the kind of ocean environment in my life. And honestly, when I moved to LA, like the main reason for me was because I wanted to be by the water. I mean, yes, it's a great city for the entertainment industry, but genuinely it was a more selfish, like I love the idea that I could live somewhere where I can surf in the morning and then, work on a project with someone that same day and be in an urban kind of areas too. So I've always been interested in, I guess, cities on the coast. And obviously Pacific Ocean's very different than the English Channel, but
I would say at the moment where we've been, it's not too dissimilar at the moment in water temperature, but
it's always cold.
The North Sea of the English Channel.
But so I first surfed when I was like 7 or 8 down in Cornwall, and then my mum's family side of the family all live in Australia, so I'd sometimes surf there once every 2 years, but not really ever to the point where I was doing anything. And then when I moved to California, 5 years ago, I then like actually
daily ritual
got into it. And then, but I've ebbed and flowed in like how much I surf, kind of changes towards like what's happening else in my life. And it's been a bit cold, and it's been a bit not that great over this winter. But down here is great in the summer in San Diego, so I can't wait. And I just have met so many people surfing, and feel like, I don't know, just like, my favorite place to be is in the water, and feel like it's what I love about surfing is it's like a communal experience, because there are other people surfing, whether they're your friends or not, but it's a very like solitary experience, the relationship I think you have with waves and with
time
the
spent
ocean,
immersed in the sea.
And like time can just absolutely stretch and expand, and you can be in the water for hours without realizing it. And I think what I love about surfing is, unlike some other sports I've been interested in, it's like the least the way I see it is like, and the way the people I put myself around, they don't see it as like a competitive thing. And I think a wave can come by and you can decide, I don't want that wave, or a wave can come and like, oh yeah, that's my one. And I feel like it's quite like reflective of how I'd like to like take my day. That it doesn't need to be like I need to climb a mountain, or however other different kind of mentalities sometimes can happen with other sports. I like that like surfing can like you can just decide.
Change session to session, doesn't it?
And it's just like there's no wave that literally will ever be the same.
No.
And I think it's just and I think just the ocean's energy is like, whoa, I'm so small in the world.
But there's something, and we could go very deep on that, and the fact this energy travels all the way across open ocean.
Exactly.
Starts with wind generation, forms swell through fetch, and then arrives, and that energy dissipates on the shoreline somewhere. And
but
there's
it's
definitely
still
people
like
who think that energy
water.
is then transferred to the surfer. It's
and I think how memory, and like being so much of water ourselves, and how water can hold memory. I feel like, I mean, there's just so many like mystical elements to the ocean that I love.
It's pretty potent, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I surfed dreadful San Onofre yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
And
I drove past it the other day and it was like so blown out.
Yeah, well, this was it. So
yeah, it's windy.
We were with Chad at Surf Rider, and he said, yeah, no, this is normally pretty classy.
I was there the other week. I just got a new surfboard and I went to christen it in the... and it was like a perfect day.
Was it? Okay. Well, I could see
summer there is like
potential.
Great. It's not like, you know, to get... I feel like right now you want to be north, right?
Okay.
Like the best places to be are like from LA, I remember in the winter you'd go up to like Ventura and stuff. But down here it's like not. But down here it's good in summer.
Yeah. Well, I got classic British Cornwall blustery,
yeah,
windy, wobbly waves,
I brought
which I can handle.
Waves. Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah,
but
you're like, oh, this is a good day. This is great.
Just means I'll have to come back. So
yeah, you will. They're just so it's just all up and down this coastline. There are so many, and California, as you've experienced on this trip, is like so massively different from north to south.
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you, and I think we'll go maybe try get in the water somewhere.
See some water.
So we'll go gently.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Bonnie.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. A massive thanks to Bonnie, who was so willing with her time and able to show us around. Also for shaking off and moving past the Harry Potter icebreaker pun I made when we first arrived. Safe to say that part of Bonnie's life feels very much in the rear view, for all the right reasons, as she indeed goes gently with her new direction, establishing herself as one of the more influential people in the climate movement and conversation, where we need more people like Bonnie with reach, empathy and a new, energised way of approaching these topics. I would highly recommend grabbing a copy of Go Gently, packed with takeaways for each of us as to what we can all do in our day-to-day lives to lessen our impact on the planet and better our own output. Which brings us to the end of our Californian omnibus. A massive thanks to all our guests who played host to us, who showed us around local surf and swim spots, and who shared their stories with us. We'll be back again next month with more tales and insights from a roster of inspirational people as we continue to explore and uncover the theme of human resilience and the many spaces people occupy across our ocean. In the meantime, head into the ever-growing library of episodes to keep listening. A thanks to Gareth at Chatterbox Audio for helping us stitch the show together. Sound designed by CJ Mirror. If you are listening via the usual podcast platforms, subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes, and we'll see you next time.